Ahoy! Welcome to Dream Prague, the channel where you get an American's perspective on what it's like to live in Prague, Czechia. And I'm Jen, or as the Czechs would pronounce it, Jen. But they call me Jana, meaning Jane, which is not my name, but they're trying to squeeze Jennifer into a little Czech package, and that's Jana. So today we're going to explore the fascinating history and culture of Czech given names, Czech surnames, and why feminists are ruining everything, as they often do. Now, just like their cuisine, Czech people don't like to get creative when naming their children. Pork and potatoes will do just fine. In fact, until 1989, Czech people had to name their children according to a list of government-approved Czech names. Only since the Velvet Revolution have Czechs been allowed to even consider a non-Czech name for their child. But the Czechs didn't just throw the rules out the window along with communism. The babies' names still have to get approved by a special government office. I came across an article from 2004 about two Czech parents who wanted to name their child Finn because they were enamored with all things Scandinavian. When they tried to apply for this baby's birth certificate, Pani Bolshitova at the Úřad stopped dead in her tracks when she heard this foreign-sounding name to consult a very important book called Jak se bude vaše dítě jmenovat, meaning what will you name your child? More like what you will name your child, by Dr. Miloslava Napová, the leading and apparently only expert in this field. And since the name Finn was not in the book, the parents had to have an expert consultation for the price of 1,000 crowns with Dr. Napová herself. And this fee was just for her consideration. It didn't even guarantee approval. And she apparently had a long history of rejecting names. Fortunately for little Finn's family, his name was finally approved for the sum of 590 crowns. Talk about a self-licking ice cream cone. The lesson here, don't get creative with pork and potatoes, or it'll cost you. There's another reason that Czechs don't just pick names out of thin air. Picking a non-Czech name would be like depriving your child of a birthday celebration. Let me explain. Perhaps you've been to Prague and you've seen the famous astronomical clock. And on its face, there's listed every day of the year, and there are some saints' names written around it. And those mostly correspond to the Czech name days that are still celebrated today. Every Czech name has a special day of the year, or svátek, and anyone who has a name that's celebrated on that day is given small gifts, flowers, maybe some chocolate or spirits. And every day of the year, except for national holidays, corresponds with a Czech girl and Czech boy name. The name Polnoční bouře, or midnight storm, is not listed on the astronomical clock, and nor is it in Mrs. Napová's book. But little Midnight Storm was born in the mountains of Šumava in 2001 during, wait for it, a midnight storm. To vegetarian parents professing an alternative lifestyle. Love how all articles mention that the parents were vegetarian, as if that totally explains the madness. The whole country was apparently wrapped with the details of this story. The name registration office decided that Midnight Storm was not an appropriate name for a Czech child. Poor little Midnight Storm couldn't get a birth certificate, and therefore she couldn't get health insurance, and therefore she couldn't get a pediatrician, and therefore she could not get mandatory vaccinations. So the government had to get involved, because this is not the Wild West. Midnight Storm's parents were sick of fighting with the government, and so they finally gave in and named her Eliška, which is currently the most popular Czech girl's name. As an American, I don't see what the fuss is about. Not only do Americans name their children with ridiculous names like Apple and Audio Science and Blanket and Khaleesi. That was before the final season. But we kind of respect the uniqueness of a name that you can't spell or pronounce. Very cool. So personally, I think Midnight Storm is a great name. She'd fit right in Hollywood. But I also think it's really cool to have a traditional ethnic name. My sister was named after our Montenegrin great-grandmother, Vidosova, and I've always been a little jealous of the name. I'd love to have a name that reflected my roots and my ancestry. My name is so common in the United States that people usually have to use my last name to know which Jennifer they're talking about. I guess the grass is always greener. When I first started teaching English in Czechia, I was handed a roster of my students' names, and I completely butchered them. I just kind of thought that the Hacheks and the Charkas were just like cool decoration. I still do sometimes. So I'd call Sharka Sarka, I'd call Matyáš Matyas, and I'd call Přemysl Bob. Most of my Czech students were perfectly fine letting me anglicize their Czech names with my terrible pronunciation. Except Přemysl, who forced me to say the Přemyslid dynasty every single time I saw him. And because of him, I can properly pronounce my R. Sometimes. Czechs don't have middle names like we do in America. And this kind of is complicated when I apply at a government office or at a bank, and I have to put my full name on something. They just kind of think that my middle name is an interchangeable first name. And since they're such sticklers about properly filling out forms, this can result in some problems. Most Americans don't even use their middle names, but at least that makes their names a little bit more distinctive than just John Smith, it's John Stephen Smith. The Czechs might want to look into this because if you've ever tried to find one of your new Czech friends on Facebook, you're going to be looking for Jan Svoboda or Eliška Nováková for hours because there are 17,000 people with that exact name. Good luck reuniting with that pretty Czech girl you met in a pub. You're never going to find her. Czechs love to make everything cute, so they're big on nicknames. And sometimes the nicknames seem unrelated to the real names, at least to my English-speaking ears. So Josef becomes Peppa, Jan becomes Hansa, and František becomes Fanta. And just in case those names weren't cute enough, the Czechs then make them diminutive. Hansa becomes Hanzik, Peppa becomes Pepik, or even Pepiček. Eva becomes Evička, Alžbeta becomes Bětuška, Katarzyna can become Katka, Kacha, Kachka, Katya, Kachenka, and on and on and on. And if you really feel like getting cute, you can call someone a pet name, like Broček, which means little beetle, Beruška, meaning ladybug, Zlatičko, which means little golden one, or Kočka, meaning kitty, but that also has a racier meaning. And if you're wondering, yes, I did have a nickname. It was Boogie Woogie, and I am not taking questions. Czech surnames are almost as common as the Czech given names. They might sound really exotic to a foreigner, but they're very basic, like colors and professions, just like in English. My student was Mr. Black, my neighbor is Mr. Grandfather, and my law professor was Dr. Freedom. But there are also quite creative surnames that we don't have in English, like Mr. Soon to be Rich, Mr. Back in Those Days, Mr. Don't Eat Bread, why? And Mr. I'm Not Going to Tell. That's a little creepy. Czech females, however, have different surnames than their fathers, brothers, husbands, and sons. Their names are feminized by adding an a or an ova to the end. So Mr. Novak's wife is Mrs. Nováková. Mr. Dědeček's wife is Mrs. Dědečková. And Mr. Černy's wife is Mrs. Černá. It is legally possible, but not common, for the man to take the woman's surname. So Jana Nováková's husband would be Mr. Novak. Even the founding father of Czechoslovakia, Thomas Garrigue Masaryk, took his wife's surname Garrigue and used it as his middle name. But she became Mrs. Masaryk. Moskova, even though she was American. And they even add the ova to foreign women's name without even asking. This is particularly amusing when watching the news about Hillary Clintonova, or hearing that Julianne Morova is going to be at the Karlovy Film Festival, or seeing that Michelle Obamova has a new book out on the shelves. The Czechs just stuck the ova right on the end. The nerve. When I first learned about this system of adding ova to a woman's last name, I was told by several Czechs that the ova signified the possessive, that the man owned his wife or the father owned his daughter. This, of course, got my feminist hackles up. But according to Czech grammar experts, ova signifies that something is the property of someone else's, while ova, hear the difference? Expresses affiliation with someone's family. That decoration is important. But my misunderstanding shows that there's still a vague idea in Czech culture that the ova signifies a man's property. And therefore, the Czech names are pretty sexist, even if it's just really a function of grammar. In the US, ever since the feminist movement in the 1960s, it has become fashionable for women to keep their own birth names when they get married. I would say that amongst my female friends, about half of us have kept our original surname when we got married. For me, I wasn't trying to make a feminist statement. I just felt like it was a little odd at the age of 29 to totally change my identity. Since my husband has a lovely Czech name, I use it for fun, but my original name is still my legal name. But in Czechia, that's not an option. The law says that a woman must have the feminine version of her father or her husband's surname, which is usually ova. And there are only 4 exceptions. First, if she's married to a foreigner. Second, if she has a foreign nationality. Third, if she lives with a foreigner. Or fourth, if she lives abroad. In a few polls, 28% of Czech women said they wanted to take their husband's surname without adding the ova. That way their names would match, and their names would also match their sons' last names. Currently, there's a movement in the lower house of parliament to allow women to do just that. And if these feminists and their representatives in government have their way, the entire convoluted Czech grammatical system will come crashing down. Really, the Czech language is what's to blame. You see, it has this awful thing called declension. It's a whole extra layer of rules that affect every noun, pronoun, and adjective in a sentence, including your damn name. Very briefly, declension affects your name by changing the end of it, depending on what you're doing in a sentence. And if there's no ova or a at the end of a woman's surname, we don't know if Mrs. Novakova is chasing her dog or if she's being chased by her dog. Changing this grammatical structure will naturally result in chaos spreading through the entire Czech-speaking world, or so say opponents to this bill in the House of Parliament. Even though the feminist movement has gained some momentum since they tried this back in the early 2000s, I don't know if this bill will pass through Parliament. This is a conservative country that is largely allergic to political correctness. Now, you in America might be shocked at this government reach into something as personal as a woman's name. It's not like it's her uterus. Personally, I don't think that this problem is the result of the Czech government, nor is this the fault of Mrs. Self-Appointed Baby Naming Overlord, Ova. I think the enemy is right here in our midst. I'm taking a one-woman stand against the tyranny of Czech declension. Just imagine, Czech speakers, if you could be like English, and you could use one noun in any part of the sentence without changing it at all, and even turn that noun into a verb, or an adjective if you liked. Now that is freedom. So what do you think? Should Czechs be able to choose any name they want for their children, or should the government have some say? Do you think Czech women should be able to drop the ovas from their name, or do you think that would create total grammatical catastrophe? Tell me in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching, and while you're here, why don't you check out one of my other videos? I'm always happy to read your comments and I try to answer as many as possible. Tak, uvidíme se příští týden. Ahoj!